T here with this LouieTeeNetwork exclusive, the Command Post. You know what it is. Post up, take command, UDFA Confidential. Long shots with a shot to make this upcoming 2023 Washington Commanders roster. It's not often that I talk about UDFAs, but in this particular case, in this year, I feel like there are a couple of spots in particular that are available if one of these guys or two or maybe three of them are able to come in and impress. And so, in keeping with the theme of this series, we've knocked down the guys that I think have the two best opportunities to make the football team in Kazmir Allen, number one, and Mason Brooks, number two, the offensive lineman out of Ole Miss. Now, here is the guy that I think has the third best odds to make the football team in wide receiver Mitchell Tinsley out of Penn State. Let's talk about the things he brings to the table and why he has an opportunity to crack the 53-man roster. Let's take a look at UDFA Mitchell Tinsley and his classifieds.
Confidential.
So, Mitchell Tinsley is 6 feet, 200 pounds, ran a 4.6 40. He's a senior coming out of Penn State, and the 4.6 40 is directly correlated to his undrafting status, him not being drafted, essentially. His inability to separate is what makes him a liability at receiver. But everything else about Mitchell Tinsley screams NFL football player. He appeared in 39 games, 26 of them at Western Kentucky, 13 at Penn State. And it made it so easy because Mitchell Tinsley was a teammate of Mason Brooks at Western Kentucky. And so it made it easy to watch both of them in terms of film study. They were on the same team. So, you know, on one given play, I could watch it twice and see what both guys were doing. And so it made it a lot easier. His best year was in 2021. We'll get to that in a second. But he only played 1 year of high school football. And for any of us who wanted to be professional athletes, I myself included, who thought we had an opportunity to play, you know, other sports, whether it be basketball or, you know, whatever, baseball, and you were looking to grow, you know, 3 or 4 more inches. This is probably the case with Mitchell Tinsley. He's probably a hooper, you know, growing up. And then he probably realized going into his senior year, I'm not growing anymore. I'm roughly 6 feet, not going to grow to 6'5". We've heard the stories of guys like Scottie Pippen, 5'11", you know, going into his senior year of high school, and then he sprouts up, you know, 9 inches and ends up being like 6'8", you know, 6'7", 6'8". We've heard the Dennis Rodman story. And Dennis Rodman was like 6 feet tall, and then, you know, one summer he grows to like 6'10", 6'9", 6'10". And we've all heard those stories. That wasn't Mitchell Tinsley's fate, and it wasn't mine either. And so he probably didn't play football because he was doing something else, thought he had a future in that, and then realized probably should play football. And ended up being pretty good. But obviously when you wait that late to play ball, you're not on anybody's radar. And so he had to go the JUCO route for a year, tore it up there enough so that he got an opportunity and a scholarship from Western Kentucky. You know, modest numbers his first year, and then really tore it up in his second year at Western Kentucky with Bailey Zappi at quarterback. 87 catches, 1,402 yards, and 14 touchdowns in that one season. And so that put him on the map, made him a very intriguing transfer portal player. He ended up going to Penn State. And he's a solid season at Penn State. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we get into his file. But 181 catches for 2,356 yards and 23 touchdowns in his career, spanning 2 different schools. So let's really dive into the file as we continue on with Mitchell Tinsley.
Confidential.
So The first thing you notice with Tinsley is he's got
New
exceptionally strong
now.
hands.
Order.
I love that about him. I love his strong hands. I love the fact that he's fearless. Will make tough contested catches in traffic, and will go over the middle of the football field. We'll elaborate on that here in a second, but let's just start with his hands being exceptional and him plucking the football out of the air. Does a really good job with body control and adjusting to the football as well. A negative is he lacks top end speed. Obviously, that's the thing that I highlighted earlier in the breakdown. The 4.6 is very noticeable on tape. It also shows up when route running, and he's not extremely quick either. So he's not quick, he's not fast. So there's really no discernible trait there in that department. And because he lacks the top end speed, he doesn't have any real deceptiveness or wiggle. It leads to him having less separation at the top of routes. Now, he is physical at the stem of routes and able to big body guys and get them off of him and come back to the football, but it leads to a lot of contested catches, which he wins a lot of the time, but it's not quarterback friendly, and it can get you into trouble. And at the next level, it could be very problematic with much better corners that are much more physical and athletically gifted who will not give him the space that he saw at the collegiate level. A positive, though, is he's extremely physical at the point of catch, as I've mentioned already. He's willing to do all of the dirty work. He'll block. He'll go over the middle and make the tough catch, not worrying about his body or bodily harm. And he just makes physical catches. He'll go down and dig it out of the turf. He'll take a shot. He sees the safety coming, doesn't care, will still go up and get the football. He does all of the things that you want your physical receiver to do. He's the guy that on 3rd and 8, with a guy draped all over him, you can throw it to him and he'll still come down with it, i.e. a Pierre Garçon type of guy, right? That's Mitchell Tinsley is the type of guy that will quickly force you to fall in love with this game. He's one of those guys that will endear himself to you very quickly. If you see enough of him, you'll say, I really like this guy. A negative, he'll struggle against sticky man-to-man coverage. And I thought this was really shown at Penn State versus better defenders. So I told you what kind of a season he had in 2021 with Bailey Zappi at the helm, tearing up teams like UTSA. And he had a really good game against Michigan State, which was a Big Ten team when he was at Western Kentucky. But, you're playing a lot of those teams in that conference that you're able to handle, and he took it to those teams. He gets to the Big Ten, and when he sees the big boys, he didn't have a single 100-yard game. Some of that could have been on the quarterback situation at Penn State. It wasn't the most ideal. They weren't a great offense this past year, but a lot of that, too, was on the fact that Mitchell Tinsley just wasn't getting open. He wasn't getting open against Ohio State, 5 catches for 24 yards. He wasn't getting open against Michigan, 5 catches for 54 yards. He wasn't getting open against much better competition, the elites of the elite in college football and in that conference in the Big Ten, which I think is the second best conference in all of college football. He just wasn't able to get free. And that's going to get even worse as you get to the next level. Now, what I will say is offenses become more complex and dynamic. And a guy like Mitchell Tinsley is great at sitting down in zone coverage, and he'll be a great zone beater. And there are guys that have had very long, illustrious careers by being zone beaters, sitting down in zone coverage, making themselves available, making tough catches. A guy like Derek Mason comes to mind if you're thinking about a comp for him in the NFL. Just a guy that was never the fastest, never the quickest, but always able to sit down in the right spot, make the tough catches. I see a lot of that in Mitchell Tinsley. Lastly, physical run after the catch despite lacking a true burst and dynamic agility or real suddenness. He's physical with the football in his hands. Similar to Terry, who doesn't have a lot of wiggle, but will run through arm tackles and is hard to get down on the ground once he gets going. Mitchell Tinsley is a lot like that. He's a guy that if you come with a shoulder and you think you're going to bump him down, think again. He's going to bounce right off of that and keep on running. And we saw that in a few games in his collegiate career where guys thought they were going to just, bogart him down with a shoulder, and he just bounces off and keeps on running. So he's a guy that with the football in his hands, which is why they threw him the football a lot underneath, both at Penn State and Western Kentucky, because he's a guy that gets you a yard or two after contact. Similar to a running back, you want to see him fall forward. Mitchell Tinsley has a lot of that going for him after the catch. So my comp for him, former Washington Commander, or former Washington football player, rather, comp for him, confidential, is Joshua Morgan. So I would have loved to have given him the Pierre Garçon treatment, but the problem is Pierre Garçon was a 4-4 guy. Pierre could run. That threatened corners, forced them to have to back up, gave him the space he needed to operate. And if you fell asleep behind the wheel, Pierre could get behind you and make a big play. We all remember the Griffining play with Pierre. He was the receiving end of that, right? Rick Griffin's on the ground with his hands in the air, but Pierre's doing all the dirty work, going up, getting the football, and then outrunning the entire New Orleans Saints defense into the end zone. He actually hurt his toe on that play and missed the next 4 or 5 games or whatever it was. But Mitchell Tinsley can't do that. He can't run away from a defense, even after making a big catch like that. So he can't give him the Pierre Garçon treatment, but I can give him the Joshua Morgan treatment. And if you recall, Joshua Morgan was a really good receiver in Washington for a 2-year span. I think he was here 12 and 13. Made a lot of tough contested catches, was physical, blocked, did a lot of the dirty work. And I always remember this, and it's not fair to Josh Morgan, but I always remember him for throwing the football at Cortland Finnegan late in that Rams game in 2012 that cost us 15 yards and ultimately cost us the game because our field goal kicker then missed the field goal that would have won us that game. But Joshua Morgan did some good things in Washington, was a physical receiver, and did all the dirty work, and I see a lot of that in Mitchell Tinsley. So that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on UDFA Confidential. I thank you guys for joining me, and I look forward to chopping it up with you with another episode of this limited series, Longshots with a Shot. Until next time, you guys know what it is. Post up, take command. Have a good one.
LouieTeeNetwork.